My name is Mara Ellington. I'm 68, a retired art teacher, and the sort of woman people describe as steady. I like quiet mornings. Watercolor brushes lined up by hue, and the sound of the kettle just before it whistles. My life in Charlottesville has grown smaller since my husband passed. But it has been warm mostly because of Rowan, my daughter. She and her husband, Caleb, moved in last spring after their business failed. I told everyone it was temporary, but I secretly liked the company. The house didn't echo so much when they were here. Tonight had been ordinary. Rowan had called from upstairs FaceTime because she said it made her feel connected. We'd laughed about dinner, about Caleb's habit of leaving tools in the hallway. When she hung up, I felt a small pulse of gratitude. Maybe this arrangement, messy as it was, had worked. I carried my mug to the sink, half listening to the crickets outside the kitchen window. That's when I heard her voice again, still coming from my phone on the counter. The call hadn't ended. "Living with her is hell," Rowan said. Her tone was low, flat. "But we're only putting up with her for her money." A second voice. "Cool and amused, her mother-in-law." Iris Ward laughed softly. "At least she's good for something." My hand tightened around the edge of the counter until my knuckles burned. The phone speaker carried every word. The laughter went on two women bonding over contempt. I should have hung up, should have moved, spoken, done anything. Instead, I stood there, heart thudding against my ribs. My mind tried to explain it away. Stress, misunderstanding, exhaustion. But the laughter didn't sound like stress. It sounded like relief. When the call finally clicked off, the kitchen felt cavernous. The hum of the refrigerator was suddenly loud, the lights too sharp. I reached for my mug and found my hand shaking so badly I couldn't lift it. Upstairs, I heard footsteps, Rowan's and Caleb's, crossing the landing. Their muffled voices mixed with the faint sound of a closing door. I stayed where I was, the taste of bitterness rising in my throat. Realizing the night had changed something I could never undo, I turned off the light, leaving the kitchen in shadow, and listened to the house breathe. Upstairs, life went on as if nothing had happened. Down here, I began to listen differently. Morning sunlight cut across the kitchen tiles, pale and deliberate. I moved through the motions. Coffee, toast, the slow turn of a spatula, each movement practiced enough to hide the tremor in my hands. Rowan came down humming, her voice too light for someone who'd spoken the way she had last night. Caleb followed, scrolling through his phone, murmuring a distracted, "Morning." I placed the plates before them, the smell of eggs and rosemary filling the room. Rowan thanked me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You didn't have to cook. Mom, you should rest more." Her words were smooth, polished, like a script she'd rehearsed. I nodded, careful not to linger on her face too long. Caleb was already joking about some headline, then about my quirky budgeting system. I forced a small laugh, the kind that could pass for agreement. He meant nothing by it, at least. I hoped not, but the word budgeting landed wrong now, sharp against my ribs. Halfway through breakfast, Rowan's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and answered quickly, her voice warming in an instant. "Hi, Iris." I turned toward the sink, pretending to rinse a cup. Her tone softened into the same sweetness I'd heard through the speaker the night before. Laughter floated behind me short, knowing, the same rhythm. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. When Rowan ended the call, she went quiet, busying herself with wiping an already clean spot on the table. Caleb muttered something about errands and left the room. For a long moment, only the ticking of the wall clock filled the air. I collected the empty plates, stacking them neatly, one over the other, the porcelain clinking like punctuation marks to a truth I wasn't ready to say aloud. They thought I hadn't heard. They thought the curtain was still drawn. As I wiped down the counter, I caught my reflection in the window's steady hands, tired eyes. I wasn't sure whether the lie belonged to them for telling it, or to me for pretending I hadn't heard. Upstairs, a door closed softly, and the house returned to its polite quiet. The house had always been my attempt at healing. After Charles died, I couldn't stand the apartment we'd shared for 40 years, its silence pressed against me like a hand over my mouth. So, when the inheritance cleared, I bought this old Georgian place on Locust Avenue. It needed work, a sagging porch, wallpaper that peeled like old skin, windows that rattled in the wind, but it had light wide, forgiving light that fell across every surface like a promise. Rowan had come the first weekend, bringing flowers and plans. She said it felt like home already, at the time. I believed her. She and Caleb were struggling then, their small marketing studio collapsing under unpaid invoices. They'd sold their condo, packed their things, and I'd said, "Come stay here until things settle." It sounded so harmless, so temporary. I paid for repairs, for groceries, for the new washer when the old one died. When Rowan's boutique debt followed her like smoke, I covered that too. "It's a loan," I'd said, though I never wrote it down. I wanted to believe help could be love if given freely. My neighbor, Mrs. Hanley, once told me over the fence, "You're generous to a fault." Mara, people forget to give back when you never let them owe you. I'd laughed then, brushing it aside, but lately that sentence kept returning an echo against everything I saw. The yard where Rowan promised to plant roses is still bare. The guest room she called her studio is now just storage boxes stacked, projects unfinished. Even Caleb's laughter, once easy, has turned cautious, careful around me. I look around the house now and see all the pieces I paid for, not the warmth I thought I was buying. Every room bears the same question, unspoken, but constant. What was built for love, and what was built because I couldn't stand to be alone outside. The late sun slips behind the oaks, washing the brick walls in gold. I stand at the window, watching the light fade from what I once called my safe place, realizing how easily affection had been mistaken for agreement. By Tuesday, the unease had begun to settle like dust in the corners impossible to sweep away. I logged into my bank account after lunch, meaning only to pay a bill, but the numbers didn't make sense. A charge from a boutique in Richmond, a delivery service in Soy, and a luxury skincare brand I'd never heard of. I scrolled down the list, each transaction more foreign than the last. At first, I blamed error. Maybe the card had been skimmed, or a clerk had entered the wrong digits. But when I checked the linked card, my stomach dropped. It wasn't mine. It was ours, the household account Rowan insisted on for convenience. Later that afternoon, while tidying the study, I found a crumpled receipt tucked inside a cookbook. Designer shoes, $400. The signature at the bottom was hers. That night, I sat in the dark living room, only the hallway light spilling across the floor. Upstairs, Rowan's voice drifted through the vents, hushed but urgent. "Mom's accounts," she said, the words clipped, impatient. Caleb's reply was softer. "We have to be careful," Iris said too, then a pause, footsteps, and the sound of their door closing. I sat there, the air heavy around me, and reached for my phone. A new notification blinked, a voice memo automatically saved from earlier that day. I pressed play. Rowan's voice filled the room, brisk and unbothered. "I'm using Mom's card for errands again. She won't notice." A laugh followed, light, careless, familiar. The kind of laugh that used to warm me. I opened a drawer and pulled out a small blue notebook I'd once used for grocery lists. On the first page, in neat cursive, I wrote household notes. Beneath it, I added the date, the times of the transactions, and the words I'd just heard. The pen pressed so hard it nearly tore through the paper. When I closed the cover, the blue looked darker than before, like something hidden beneath the ink was starting to breathe. By Thursday morning, I'd stopped pretending the balance would correct itself. The blue notebook was half-full dates, figures, fragments of overheard words. It didn't look like a record of family life anymore. It looked like evidence. I took the bus downtown, past the brick buildings of Market Street, until the sign for Penrose and Shaw. Attorneys at law came into view. The office sat above a florist, the air faintly smelling of lilies. Inside, everything was quiet, the sort of hush that made truth sound heavier when spoken aloud. Eleanor Penrose rose from behind her desk as I entered. She was in her 50s, tall, deliberate in movement, her glasses catching the light as she shook my hand. "Mrs. Ellington, please have a seat." The words came out halting at first. I told her about the shared account, about my daughter and son-in-law, about the late-night voices through the vent. She didn't interrupt, only nodded, her pen moving steadily across a yellow pad. When I faltered, she poured a glass of water and waited. "You've been more patient than most," she said at last. "It's time to protect yourself." She explained things carefully: a revocable living trust, the revocation of shared account authority, a durable power of attorney that would end with a signature. Legal words that felt foreign on my tongue, but somehow reassuring. I read each page twice before signing. My hands didn't tremble this time. The ink bled into the paper like a quiet vow. When it was done, Eleanor slid the folder toward me. "You don't owe them silence," she said gently, "but silence can be a kind of armor." Outside, the afternoon sun reflected in the office window. For the first time in weeks, I saw my own face clearly lined. Yes, but no longer blurred by guilt. The glass caught my reflection as I walked past an older woman carrying a manila folder. Her stride measured, her back straight. The city hummed around me. Ordinary and alive, I kept walking, the folder pressed against my chest, as if steadying something that had just begun to shift back into place. I brought home a basket of groceries that afternoon, the folder from Eleanor tucked carefully beneath a stack of mail. Rowan was arranging flowers in a glass vase, lilies again, her favorite. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon polish and something too deliberate. As I set the bags down, I said lightly, "Eleanor thinks I should simplify my will. Fewer complications that way." Rowan's hand paused mid-air, a stem dripping water onto the counter. "Oh, I didn't know you were updating things." Her voice was even, but the brightness in it strained like glass about to crack. Caleb looked up from his phone. "Makes sense, I guess." Planning ahead, his smile was too quick, too careful. I nodded, as if the conversation meant nothing, and asked if they wanted tea. Rowan declined, saying she had calls to make. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and, faint through the vent, Rowan's voice. "If she changes it, we'll lose everything," she whispered. Iris's name followed, and then a pause. "No, I can't push too hard. She'll notice." I turned my pillow over, my pulse loud in my ears. Every word was confirmation fear disguised as love. Calculation dressed as care. Morning came gray and brittle. I was washing dishes when the doorbell rang. Iris Ward stood on the porch, wearing pearls and a smile that didn't touch her eyes. She carried a small box of pastries wrapped in gold paper. "I was just in the neighborhood," she said. "Thought I'd check on you. Older minds can be forgetful with paperwork." Her tone was sweetened just enough to sound like pity. I wiped my hands on a towel and stepped aside to let her in. "Oh, I remember plenty," I said softly. "But thank you for reminding me." She blinked, uncertain whether it was courtesy or warning. I poured her tea. Steady hands, calm voice, while something deep inside me settled into stillness, the kind that comes just before a storm knows where to land. By the end of the week, the house felt quieter, though not peaceful. I'd grown used to the sound of my own restraint, the way silence can feel like armor when truth is too sharp to hold barehanded. One morning, after Rowan left for errands, I opened my laptop and logged into the joint account again. The screen flickered, then filled with rows of transactions, each one colder than the last. A series of transfers, all marked consulting fees. I clicked one open and saw the recipient Mara Ellington, Creative Consulting, my daughter's maiden name. My breath caught. The dates lined up neatly with the weeks she'd asked for grocery money and repair reimbursements. The pattern was careful, deliberate, almost professional. I printed every statement and placed them in a plain folder. Across the tab, I wrote in pen for review. The words steadied me, though my hands shook when I slid the folder into the drawer beside Eleanor's trust papers. That afternoon, Caleb found me pruning the azaleas by the porch. He looked uneasy, a man caught between defense and guilt. "Mara," he began, "Rowan's been stressed. She says you've been distant lately. It's all because of Iris, she keeps pushing." I kept my eyes on the shears. "I see," he sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "She just wants Iris off her back. That's all. You know how her mother-in-law can be." The words landed like stones in my chest. There it was, the whole web, knotted and clear. Iris whispering entitlement, Rowan obeying out of pride, and Caleb too afraid to stop any of it. The theft wasn't simple greed. It was inheritance turned into leverage. Love traded for approval. For a moment, I almost pitied them. That was the cruelest part, pity, not rage. Because pity meant I'd already let go of the fight they thought they were winning. When Caleb walked back inside, I looked at the shears glinting in my hand and thought of paper, signatures, and names on bank screens, fragile things that could still be cut clean. The evening unfolded with the same routines that had always disguised discomfort. The table was neatly set, candles flickering against the polished silver. I'd cooked roast chicken because Rowan liked it, the scent of rosemary filling the room, as if normalcy could be baked back into place. Caleb poured wine, trying to sound cheerful. Rowan kept checking her phone between bites, glancing toward the kitchen counter where her Bluetooth speaker blinked softly. When it rang, she tapped the screen without looking. "Hi, Iris," she said, her tone bright, the kind she saved for company. The speaker caught the connection, and a clear voice filled the air. "She's slow," Iris said, "but sign the deed before she realizes it. You can't risk waiting." For a moment, the room didn't breathe. Caleb's fork stopped midair. Rowan's hand froze above her glass. The voice on the speaker went on, calm and confident. "You've already moved most of it. Finish the rest while she's still distracted with her art and her little papers." I set my own glass down. The sound deliberate. "You forgot to hang up again." "Dear," I said quietly. Rowan turned pale, her lips parting, but no words came. Caleb looked at her, then at me, as if caught between loyalty and survival. The speaker hummed in the silence, then crackled as Iris's voice faltered. "Mara!" The call ended abruptly. The only sound left was the soft clink of cutlery shifting against plates. Rowan's breathing turned shallow. Caleb's face drained of color. I reached for a napkin and folded it neatly beside my plate. Every movement measured. "I think that's enough dinner for tonight," I said. Rowan stood so quickly, her chair scraped the tile. She mumbled something about cleaning up later and disappeared down the hallway. Caleb lingered, helpless, before following her. The candles sputtered out on their own. I sat alone at the table, the faint echo of Iris's voice still hanging in the air, as if the walls themselves had finally learned to repeat the truth I'd known all along. I waited until the house was still, until even the refrigerator's hum seemed to fade into something expectant. Rowan and Caleb sat across from me in the living room, the lamplight low. the folder resting on my lap. I could feel the weight of it, not the paper itself, but what it meant. "I think we should talk," I said. My voice came out steady, almost gentle. Rowan's eyes flicked to the folder. "Mom, if this is about last night, it's about everything," I said, opening it. One by one, I laid the pages out on the coffee table: bank transfers, receipts. And at the top, Eleanor Penrose's letterhead, "Revocable Living Trust." Caleb leaned forward, his knuckles white. Rowan's color drained as she scanned the documents. "You've been going through my things," she said, her voice rising. "No," I said. "I've been going through mine." For a long moment, no one moved. The clock on the mantel ticked with a kind of cruel precision. Then Rowan's composure cracked. It was Iris. She said, tears spilling suddenly, she said we'd lose everything if we didn't secure the deed. She pushed. Caleb looked down at the rug. "We thought it would just be temporary," he muttered. "Temporary theft." The words came out before I could soften them. I took a breath, then gathered the papers back into the folder. "I gave you a home. You tried to turn it into an account." Rowan covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. Caleb reached for her, but didn't speak. I stood, the folder firm against my chest. "You'll have 30 days to find a new place. I'll cover the utilities until then. After that, this house is mine again in name and in peace." Neither of them protested. The silence that followed wasn't resistance. It was defeat, the quiet kind that arrives when the last lie runs out of breath. Spring came softly to Charlottesville, the way forgiveness never does slow, hesitant, but determined to return. The air carried the faint scent of lilac and wet soil. I spent my mornings in the garden, pruning the rose bushes that had nearly died over winter. Their roots had survived the frost. Hidden strength beneath silence. I understood that feeling now. The house was quiet again, but no longer lonely. Each room breathed differently, lighter somehow. The shadows that once lingered in corners had thinned with the morning sun. I'd repainted the kitchen walls, replaced the curtains, and planted herbs by the window, small, ordinary acts that felt like reclaiming breath. On the gate outside, a new brass plaque gleamed beneath the wisteria home. By consent only. The words had come to me one night while I was weeding. They felt right clear, firm, and calm. One afternoon, I found an envelope in the mailbox. Rowan's handwriting neat, restrained. I carried it inside and opened it carefully, as if unwrapping something fragile. "Mom," it began. "I've been meaning to write, but words feel too small." We moved to Richmond. I found work again. I know I can't undo what I did, but I think about you every day. I hope the garden still blooms. There was no plea for forgiveness, only the weight of honesty. It was enough. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer beside Eleanor's documents, the ones that had saved me. Standing by the window, I watched the sunlight slide across the lilacs, catching the brass plaque on the gate until it shimmered like water. "At least she knows what it cost," I whispered. A breeze stirred the petals, scattering a few across the path. Somewhere nearby, a bird began to sing, clear, steady, and alive. The sound filled the space where laughter used to echo, soft and unpretending. I set down my gloves and let the quiet wrap around me. The house was still mine, not just in deed, but in peace. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough.